Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. Dear brothers and sisters, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullah. In this lecture we want to try and open one or two angles of the noble verse in chapter 7, verse number 142, which during the first 10 nights or 10 eves of the month of Dhul Hijjah, it's recommended to recite this verse after the reciting Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Ikhlas in a 2-unit recommended prayer. And in each unit, after reciting those 2 chapters, Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Ikhlas, it's recommended to recite this verse. And the 2-unit prayer is a recommended, emphatically recommended prayer in this holy month. And let's see what it means, what lessons we can take from it, what inner dimensions may be extrapolated from it, inshallah. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلَةً وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ 40 لَيْلَةً وَقَالَ مُوسَى لِأَخِيهِ هَارُونَ اخْلُفْنِي فِي قَوْمِي وَأَصْلِحْ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. In this noble verse, a very loose translation is something on these lines, that we made an appointment with Moosa for 30 nights, and then we extended it by 10. Although the word then is not necessary in this translation, and we extended it, or completed it rather, we perfected it by 10, meaning by 10 nights. And so the allocated term of his Lord was completed as 40 nights. And then once this was completed, it was allocated as 40 nights. وَقَالَ Moosa, Moosa said to his brother Harun that you be my successor, you be my caliph, khalifa, with respect to my people. وَأَصْلِحْ, and refine the people, the community, and don't follow in the steps of the people of corruption. وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. Okay, now this has a lot of different aspects we can enter upon, inshallah, and we'll go through them one by one. So after saving the people of Israel, after saving Bani Israel, Israel means the servant of Allah. Il means Allah, and Isra meaning a servant. Now the servant of Allah is referring to a prophet, and this prophet is called Yaqub, Jacob alayhi salam. And Israel, the servant of God, is a title for Yaqub. So when we say Bani Israel, we mean the children and descendants of Yaqub, of Jacob alayhi salam. And after saving Bani Israel from the Pharaoh and the army of Pharaoh, once they were saved, here the divine call was made to Moosa alayhi salam, and the divine call was, it's time to enter communion with me, with your Lord. So this appointment was between 2 parties, Allah and Moosa. It's time now that Moosa enters communion, being in unity with Allah, with awareness, now is the time. Now you may say, wasn't he in communion before? The answer is yes, of course he was, because they were born infallible. But being in communion has degrees. And now this is a higher degree of communion that Moosa alayhi salam has now deserved, has now earned. And this communion is a prerequisite, this higher communion, entering into unity of a higher degree, has now been, the invitation has been given, because now this is a prerequisite for Moosa being a recipient of revelation, the Old Testament, the Torah. Now he's entered a higher level. And as we shall explain later, Ayatollah Hasanzadeh Amoli has a very significant esoteric dimension of this verse, and in this regard, saying that one has to kill the inner Pharaoh in order to enter communion with Allah. The inner Pharaoh has to be killed in the same way that Moosa killed the Pharaoh, and the historical story is a truth, we accept it, but it has esoteric dimensions. We too have to kill our Mosaic spirit of Moosa, has to kill the army and the soldiers of Pharaoh, the inner shayateen, the inner satans, where we follow our lusts and whims. They have to be killed in order to be a recipient of revelation. Revelation is not only of the legislative type, like the Torah, but it is inclusive of being inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll speak more about that later, inshallah. So, in the previous verses, there's mention of the materialistic, primarily materialistic blessings Allah reminds Bani Israel that Allah had given them. And now, after recalling those blessings, Allah says that, now I want to give you the glad tidings of another blessing, but this blessing is much higher. It's a metaphysical blessing, and it's that of salvation, it's that of guidance. And this is in relation to and in reference to the Old Testament, the coming of the Torah. This is a metaphysical blessing from Allah to Bani Israel. Okay. Now let's dissect the clauses of the verse a bit more. Wawa'adna Moosa, and we made an appointment with Moosa. So here the appointment is between Allah and Moosa. Now the first question that may arise is, why is the Quran using the first person plural? We made an appointment with Moosa. Who is this we? If the communion is between Allah and Moosa, if there are two parties involved here, and the recipient of the revelation is Moosa, where he undergoes an ascension after undergoing 40 nights of ibadat in Mount Tur, so why is the first person plural being used? You can't use the first person plural and then say it's reference to Allah, because Allah is singular, is one. If you say that it's the royal we, as we have in the English grammar, where someone, because of their royalty, they say, we are going to X place, when they're referring to themselves. Or sometimes you can say that you use the first person plural to demonstrate the mightiness of the Lord in this regard. However, since the Urafa are not very allegory friendly, they don't accept metaphors and the like. The words of the Quran are all genuine, all real, and all the words are coined onto their meaning. We don't use words coined onto something else. So here, the pronoun of I is in reference to, is coined upon the being one person, whereas we, the meaning is coined upon two or more people. If you use we, but you mean many people, you're using a word, and which is, you're using a word and you're using it in a manner where it's not being used on a par with that which it's coined upon. We is coined upon two or more people. You're using it though for one person. If you say the royal we, that means you're using it as a figure of speech. That we don't use that approach in Irfan. It's not something which is friendly, at least. They're not very allegory-philic in Irfan. They're allegory-phobic. So whenever they encounter a verse in the Quran, they don't refer to majaz, allegory, or metaphors. Metaphors is one application of allegories. They have this phobia in relation to allegories, and so they always try to extract the real meaning, the haqiqi meaning. Allah is haqq, and all His words are seen as haqq and genuine and true, and there's no need to enter the domain of majazat and allegories and metaphors and so on and so forth. Okay, so some people say the we is used because the angels are intermediaries here. Well, this also, it can be criticized in different ways. First of all, with the Quran, we did have angelic intermediary in the form of Archangel Gabriel. However, with other books, we don't have that intermediary of Jibreel. The revelation of other books are like the Hadith Qudsi, the sacred traditions of the Prophet, where the Prophet says, Allah said. Revelations of previous scriptures are on a par with that constitution. So with this interpretation, there are no angelic intermediaries for you to use the first person plural. So then the question arises, so what exactly is the we referring to? And you want to use this we, so it has to be referring to two or more entities. What are they? What are those entities? Here Imam Khomeini has in other works, and where he touches upon this whole idea in general terms, he says, look, even in relation to the Quran and the Quranic revelation, we have in chapter 97, Surah Al-Qadr, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Here too we're using the first person plural. Inna anzalnahu, that we've sent down. So here we is used here too. And even in relation to the sending down of rain, the first person plural again we see is used. But it's used for something which it's not coined upon. If you want to say Allah sends down rain or Allah sends down the Quran, here it's one and Allah is one. Imam Khomeini says that when we see this in the Quran, the we is in reference to all of Allah's attributes in play. In relation to the sending down of the Quran, it's a manifestation of all of Allah's attributes. You can see it in the Quran. When you send down rain, that also all of Allah's attributes are being manifested. The rain will grant blessings to one part of the world or country. It may then lead to havoc and tsunamis in other parts and cause damage. All of Allah's Jamali and Jalali attributes are in play. Now the thing is, with all things, all of Allah's attributes are in play. In relation to all things, And so here they say that this is with emphasis, that when the we is used, there's a particular emphasis in relation to that which is the recipient of all of Allah's attributes, be it rain, be it revelation, or other things. In any case, the we is referring to two or more things. Yes, it's referring to all of Allah's attributes. So whilst we keep Allah as one party and Moosa as the other party, Moosa is encountering all of Allah's attributes here. So that's the reason for the we, or one interpretation of it. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى ثَلَاثِينَ لَيْلًا. So we made the appointment with Moosa for 30 nights. وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ. And we completed it by 10. فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ 40 لَيْلًا. So the allocated term, the specified term of his Lord, was completed as 40. Okay, now these 40 nights, collectively they're called and they're known as the Mosaic Retreat. The Mosaic Retreat. Mosaic being the word meaning attributing to Moosa alayhi salam. And this retreat was 40 days, and it's divided into a 30-day period and a 10-day period, or to be more specific, a 30-night period, then a 10 nights period. According to traditions, we have that the first 30 days is referring to the month of Dhul Qa'dah, which is the 11th month of the Islamic calendar. And the perfected period, the complemented period, the added period of 10 is in reference to the first 10 eves, the first 10 nights of Dhul Hijjah, the last and 12th month of the Islamic calendar. Okay, so this is a 40-night spiritual retreat. And right now, in these days, we are in those 10 days now. And it's in these 10 days where the Sharia has given a prescription, and the prescription is to recite this verse after Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Ikhlas in both units of a 2-unit prayer. And it's to be done between Salatul Maghrib and Salatul Isha. The Sharia gives this prescription, but the Tariqah goes much deeper. In addition to this, the Tariqah starts its prescription from day 1 of the Mosaic retreat, from the first day of Dhul Qa'dah. And there it gives a number of prescriptions. Inshallah, we'll go through 1 or 2 of them soon in this lecture. And so here the Urafa, the mystics, on the first of Dhul Qa'dah, they start this Mosaic retreat, and with the aim of attaining to annihilation after 40 nights of ibadat. It's all ibadat, and that's why the Quran says 40 nights. It doesn't say nights and days, even though the retreat was inclusive of nights and days. But since it wasn't a case of Moosa alayhi salam working during the day and then doing ibadat during the night. No. The whole of the 40 days and nights, it was all occupied with ibadat. A very holy retreat Moosa had, and this is something that the mystics today also follow, and it has Quranic approval. And the point is that during the year, there are a number of these 40-day retreats we have in the Quran. One is in relation to the month of Ramadan, with the 3 days of the month of Sha'ban at the end, and then the 30 days of the month of Ramadan, and the 6 days of Shawwal from the 2nd onwards. together is a 40-day period. But here, the Eid is on the 1st of Shawwal. There's a slight difference here, but for the people of the Tariqah, even from the 2nd day of Shawwal for 6 days, they do fast. And this is a linked 40 days. And there are other 40-day periods during the year. This is the Mosaic retreat now, what we're discussing. And it's been talked about extensively by the likes of Ayatollah Hassanzadeh Amuli, Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, and others. Okay, we'll speak more about the content of certain a'mal, inshallah, later. A question may arise as to when was the 10 days actually added. Was it after 30 days in Mount Tur that then Allah gave the order of an extra 10 days? Or was the 40 days established before Moosa left for Mount Tur? And that which is popular amongst the commentators of the Quran is that, yeah, definitely Moosa had knowledge that it would be a 40-day retreat. He knew that. He wasn't given this knowledge after 30 days. So it wasn't as if Allah said, go for 30 days, and after 30 days then Allah added. No. Before going to Mount Tur, and before doing that, he assigned his brother, who was a prophet and a ma'soom and infallible, he assigned him as his successor. He didn't come down and, for example, tell Harun to succeed him for another 10 days. No. He said, you for 40 days, you be my successor with respect to my people. And the superficial prima facie meaning of the wording of this verse also suggests this. It says it was 30 days with a perfected 10. It was specified, this was the term of his Lord. And now Moosa went to his brother and said, you be my successor, my Khalifa, with respect to my people. The context, shows that the added 10 was known by Moosa before embarking on this retreat. And we see many traditions which are called Israelite traditions, which have entered from the Old Testament and traditions of the Old Testament into Islamic traditions by means of different scholars of different eras. They've brought these in, not necessarily knowingly or with bad intention, but they had no authenticity. They had no proper transmission of transmitters. And so the chain of these traditions, the Israelite traditions, we see they come up with stories which are not on a par with the dhahir of this verse. For example, they say that the angels loved the breath of Moosa for 30 nights because he was fasting for 30 nights. This is one of the recommended actions of the Mosaic retreat. For 40 nights you fast, for 40 days you fast. It leads to your Eid on the 10th day of Dhul Hijjah, and then you don't fast. But here, then the angels, after 30 days, once Nabi Moosa brushed his teeth, and then that odor of fasting went away, and the angels complained, and then added another 10. This is not on a par with the Quran, such stories. Or for example, some stories say that Nabi Moosa, by the time he came down late by 10 days. He was late by 10 days. It's not on a par with the logic of this verse. And also, it's not on a par with the logic of other verses of the Holy Quran. For example, in chapter 20, verse 86, it says, so Moses returned to his people, angry and grieved. He said, O my people, Did your Lord not make you a good promise? So the promise was made. فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ أَرْبَعِينَ لَيْلَةً. And then was the time of its fulfillment too long for you? In reference to the 40 days. Or did you wish that wrath from your Lord descend upon you? So you broke your promise of obedience to me. It's a question of them breaking a promise, not Moosa coming late and then them using this lateness as an excuse to enter acts of polytheism. So here, this is not the most prima facie extrapolation we can make, is that the 40 days was established before Moosa embarked on his journey to the 40-day retreat, and knowing that, he assigned his brother as his Khalifa. Okay. Now, in relation to why 40 days, here, the number 40 has a lot of applications in our scriptures, in our supplications, even in jurisprudence, even in ethics and ethical prescriptions. We see this number 40 permeating through all aspects of Islam. Now, this requires a separate lecture of its own. I don't want to enter this point right now because it may require at least half an hour to go through all that. But two traditions I want to mention. One from the Holy Messenger, who said, any servant, including Moosa alayhi salam, who purifies their actions for Allah's sake for 40 days. Now, purifying your actions for Allah has degrees. Okay, we do it, and Nabi Moosa also does it, but there are degrees to it. We shouldn't think that prophets purify their actions in the manner that we purify our actions. Their level and their caliber is very high. As any servant who purifies their actions for Allah's sake for 40 days, wisdom will manifest and become disclosed from their hearts onto their tongues. Now here, the whole issue with Nabi Moosa and the 40 days was for him to be a recipient of the Torah, and then the point being that he had to explain it to the people, and he had to explain it in a way so that people can understand it. So it had to be with a lot of wisdom. So this 40 days here was in preparation to be a recipient of the Torah, and for the people so that it can aid the people's understanding, facilitate their understanding in relation to what Moosa was about to disclose to them. Also from Imam Baqir, the fifth successor to the Holy Prophet, he says that a servant who assigns their faith with sincerity over 40 days, Allah will assign and diffuse asceticism into them. Assign them with foresight concerning their spiritual bereavements and burdens, together with their cures. Establish wisdom and the right path in their hearts, and open their tongues with wisdom and true word. So it was necessary for a 40-day period to arise here, so that all these different things, the establishing of the right path for the people, so they don't follow the way of the mufsideen, establishing wisdom for them and them understanding it, having foresight of a high nature, and developing asceticism, all these over a 40-day period on a par with the Mosaic status, was making him ready now to give the message and to become a messenger, a Rasul. He was a prophet, but now he's coming with a message. He was following the Ibrahimi Sharia until now, but from now onwards it's going to be the Mosaic Sharia. Okay. Now, then another part of the verse, Moosa says to his brother Harun, Ukhlufni, you be my successor, be my Khalifa, fi qawmi, with respect to my people, wa aslih, and refine, refine them, the people. So it's like وَأَصْلِحْ قَوْمِي, but there's no need to repeat my people again. وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ, and don't follow the way of the mufsideen, sabil al-mufsideen, the way of the corrupt ones. Okay, now here in this very short clause, a lot of different interpretations can be, valid interpretations can be made. The question of leadership is very explicit in this verse, where there must always be a leader, a khalifa on earth. And even though Moosa temporarily is going into occultation, physical occultation, he's assigned a leader. Leadership has to continue even during occultation. This we see. And then if someone was to ask, what are the duties of a leader? Even today with Islamic leadership, who is the leader today? The 12th Imam. The 12th Imam is in occultation though. And the 12th Imam assigns people. You know, there are circles of intimacy with the 12th Imam. The most innermost circle, they're known as the Otad. There are 4 of them. Then there are the next circle, according to traditions, is the Abdal, the substitutes, which are 40. Why they call them the substitutes, I can't enter that discussion right now, another time inshallah. Then the next circle are the Nujaba, the pure ones. And then the outermost circle is 306, the Nujaba are 70. Then the outermost circle, which number 360, they are called the Salihin, the righteous ones. And then it's the common lay people. Here, although the 12th Imam is an occultation, physical occultation, and the point of physical occultation is occultation. He has to be not seen by the people. But leadership has to continue. And so he assigns these people, the Otad, the Abdal, the Nujaba, the Salihin. To do what? To rule. Ukhlufni fi qawmi. The 12th Imam today is saying this, that you people, you have to assign, I assign my khilafah to you. Wa asleh, and refine the people. One of the duties of leadership, of khilafah, is to refine the people, is to guide the people on the right path. It's one of the duties. And then وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ, and don't follow the way of those who are corrupt. It's a duty of leadership. With the 12th Imam, during his occultation, which is a long occultation compared to Moosa's, it's the Otad, and maybe one of the Otad in particular, who has been given this Khilafah. Those 4 are in contact with the 12th Imam, but the rest aren't. Everyone takes their instructions from the more inner circle. Now the point is, with these 4 Otad, the 40 Abdal, the 70 Nujaba, the 360 Salihin, they never disclose that we are under the command of the 12th Imam. Those traditions which say whoever says we've seen the 12th Imam, they're a liar, it means that those who say that we've seen the 12th Imam and we've taken instruction from him. Not necessarily those who say we've seen the 12th Imam. Although seeing the 12th Imam has 2 meanings, the physical seeing and seeing a vision of the 12th Imam. Seeing a vision of the 12th Imam and apparition of the 12th Imam is something we all have to strive for. But seeing the 12th Imam, the physical 12th Imam, it goes against the philosophy of occultation. All these stories of seeing the 12th Imam, first of all, I ask you this question. Are you ready to put your hand on the Quran and say they're true? I'm not. There's not one story in relation to these physical seeings of the 12th Imam that I'm ready to say that it's a true story. It's not proof for me. Many may have seen a vision of the 12th Imam. Many may have seen a vision and then they interpret it as the 12th Imam. It may not be the vision of the 12th Imam. They may err. You've all heard of the story of Rajab Ali Khayyat, a famous layperson mystic, who, the story is a long story. I don't want to go into the whole story now, but he goes to Sayyid Ali Qadi after meeting him once. He goes back to him and says that Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, is disappointed with you. I went to the Haram in Najaf. Now he's disappointed with you. Sayyid Ali Qadi said, and this is his deputy related this to a contemporary scholar, and the scholar wrote it in his memoirs. Sayyid Ali Qadi said that Rajab Ali Khayyat saw the Imam of his nafs, of his ego. Most of these stories that we hear, even if they're visions, it's visions of their ego. And then that's if the vision says that I am the 12th Imam. Even if that is the case, it's a vision of their ego. It's the Imam of their ego, not a true vision. And then in many of these visions, the vision doesn't explain or introduce himself. The person makes a conjecture that this is the 12th Imam. That's one thing. And then all these stories, so sometimes you may think it's a physical encounter, but really it's a vision, an apparition, like Lady Maryam, who had an apparition of a well-proportioned human being, thought it was a physical human being, but then Jibreel introduced himself, and Jibreel was an apparition of Lady Maryam. It wasn't a physical entity. So these errors happen. And then if all these were physical meetings for the 12th Imam, first of all, those traditions say they're fabrications. No one, the interpretation of those traditions who say that if they see the 12th Imam, whoever says they've seen the 12th Imam reject and deny them, the scholars have interpreted as those who see the 12th, who say they have an order from the 12th Imam. Not only seeing. So I'm not saying it's rationally impossible to see the 12th Imam, the physical 12th Imam in occultation, but this goes against the philosophy of occultation. And if those who do see the 12th Imam are those who have been assigned, like the Otad, and maybe other outer circle, it's possible. But those who do see amongst the Otad or the Abdal or the Nujaba, they see them because the 12th Imam wants to give a command to govern the Ummah. And that's why those traditions which say whoever sees the 12th Imam, deny them, it means whoever sees the 12th Imam and says that I have a duty from the 12th Imam, deny them. Because these people will never disclose that they're working under the 12th Imam. They will never disclose it. However much you torture them, they will never open up. And so they're amongst people. They're amongst people. The odor of the Khilafah of the 12th Imam today, it doesn't take too much to guess where it's manifesting more compared to other places. And whenever someone from one particular circle passes away, they're replaced by someone else from the outer circle which enters. So these people always exist in every given era, and today the 12th Imam has these people helping him, assisting him in this establishment, universal governance of the Mahdi. Okay, now I kind of deviated a bit too much, but the point was Moosa went into occultation, he assigned Khilafah. There were two duties of Khilafah though. One is to refine the people, The other is don't follow the way of the corrupt ones. Who are the corrupt ones here? The corrupt ones are whoever claims to have a protocol and give a plan of salvation to the people which is other than that which Allah has granted the people salvation-wise, other than Allah's message. And this is why Pharaoh is called himself, and the Quran refers to it, where Pharaoh called himself a Rabb, because a Rabb, action-wise, is one who provides a protocol of salvation, leading people to their salvation for the people. This is what Rabb means. And so, whoever says that I have a protocol for you, a manifesto, and this manifesto will lead you to your salvation, not Allah's, they are a fabricating Rabb. And that's why Pharaoh here called him, the Quran refers to him and says that he called himself a Rabb. It was because of this. Because Pharaoh wanted the people to follow his protocol, not Allah's. Whenever there's a people who want you to follow a protocol other than Allah, they are the mufsideen. That's why you have to be careful under which guardianship you're living under. It goes against the Mosaic spirit to live comfortably under a fabricating Rabb. And therefore, you'll never kill the inner Pharaoh within, and you'll never enter communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so the important point here being that the duties of a Khalifa have been very clearly established. That they have to refine the Ummah and make sure that the Ummah isn't under the auspices of the Mufsideen. Okay, now Ayatollah Hasanzadeh Amoli has, in one of his books, which I've translated these passages from this book, he goes through a number of visions he had. He shares them. This book was never published, but when the leader went to the north of Iran and visited there, he gave this to the leader as a present. And in this book, there are more than 20 apparitions and visions that Ayatollah Hasanzadeh himself experienced. 2 of them, there's mention of the Mosaic retreat. So I just want to mention a few passages from this book and read them for you. The 14th apparition he mentions, he says, I was occupied with a 40-day Mosaic prescription from the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah to the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, 1389 after Hijrah, which would be on a Gregorian calendar, the 9th of January to the 17th of February 1970. So I was occupied with a 40-day Mosaic prescription from my mentor, Allama Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai. So this shows, see how the Urafa have this prescription. And Allama Tabatabai gave this 40-day prescription to Ayatollah Hasanzadeh Amoli. During the beginning of the month of Dhul Hijjah, so during the last 10 days now, so in those perfected 10 days, during the beginning of the month of Dhul Hijjah, when I was sitting in a state of tawajjuh, which means it's a irfani term, a mystical term, where one is fully attentive to Allah. Huwa al-awwalu wal-akhiru wal-dhahiru wal-batin, and they're oblivious to everything other than Allah, and they're fully focusing in the middle of the night, in solitude, only attentive to Allah. During the beginning of the month of Dhul Hijjah, when I was sitting in a state of tawajjuh, a transition was encountered, transcending from this physical realm to a metaphysical realm, whereby I was passing by a stream. And from now on, it's a metaphysical realm. He's giving this. It's not physical. So he sees a stream, he's passing by it. It's something similar to our dreams, but he was awake, but now he's entered a spiritual state. There was a fig tree beside the stream. It had a lot of figs. I consumed 2 seeds from the tree. During the other nights of the last 10 nights, there occurred more or less resurrections with individuals, where he became resurrected in a metaphysical form with individuals, meaning transcending from this realm into metaphysical realms, where he encountered individuals, and questions and answers would often come up. For example, and we have this, and for example, he met Aristotle, for example, or Plato, or other individuals, and many questions and answers would arise. Then he says, instruction. One night, I was in the presence of my mentor Allame Tabatabai, walking towards his residence, which was this most lowliest of persons, Baytul Ma'mur, house of the commanded. And this is in reference to a heavenly abode around which angels gather. The house of Allame Tabatabai was, for Ayatollah Hassanzadeh, was like a heavenly abode where people like Ayatollah Hassanzadeh would gather and keep on going around. Although Baytul Ma'mur is in a metaphysical realm, he's just giving a comparison here, that we will always keep on circumambulating around Allame Tabatabai's house. It's a figure of speech. During the way, so he's walking towards the residence of Allame Tabatabai, in the presence of Allame Tabatabai, and this is a physical, it's all happening in the physical realm. During the way, he said, Allame Tabatabai said, before sitting down in a state of tawajjuh, in a state of attentiveness, as we said, in the middle of the night, in solitude, fully attentive to Allah. And we talked about this in our discussions on muraqabah, if you remember. He said, before sitting down in this state, recite the chapters. He mentions 2 chapters, Dhuha and Inshirah, morning brightness and opening. These 2 chapters. It's extremely beneficial vis-a-vis experiencing transitions, inner purity and righteous dreams whilst in a state of tawajjuh. You make yourself more susceptible to have these proper states. If you recite those 2 chapters a number of times before sitting in solitude in the middle of the night in a state of tawajjuh. Oh my dear, Ayatollah Hassanzadeh adds, it was only after Pharaoh was destroyed that Allah made an appointment with his Kalim, with his messenger who he spoke with, Moosa meaning. Wawa'adna Moosa 30 layla. It was only after Pharaoh was destroyed that Allah made an appointment with his Kalim. As chapter 2 verse 50 and 51 reads, and when we parted the sea with you and delivered you and drowned Pharaoh's people as you looked on, and when we made an appointment with Moses for 40 nights. That's the verse. And then Ayatollah Hassanzadeh says, no tablet will be engraved upon the Mosaic spirit unless you kill the soul's Pharaoh. When? During a Mosaic retreat. You have to kill your Pharaohness inside, destroying the whims, the lusts, the animalistic behavior. Before, and you do that in the Mosaic retreat, before you can receive the tablet from Allah, revelation. But revelation is of 2 types. Nabi Moosa received the legislative revelation. And Nabi, our holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, also received legislative revelation, which was the last of its type. But there's another non-legislative type of revelation, where you see the realities of the cosmos. You see what happened in the future, what will happen in the future, what has happened in the past, the realities of things surrounding you, and so on and so forth. That's open for everyone, male or female, infallible or not, until the day of resurrection. And then in another event, which is number 16 in the book, he says, on Friday, the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah, 1392 after Hijrah, 8th of December, 1972. Once again, 2 years after the previous incident, once again I commenced another Mosaic 40-day retreat. I was undergoing and experiencing a mighty sense of constriction, where one feels an inner constriction as a result of one's spiritual progress. I attended the presence of my mentor, His Excellency Allama Tabatabai, and said, I am undergoing immense episodes of constriction. Please instruct me so as to be freed from it, so that I can encounter relief. During the second eve of that month, the month of Dhul Qa'dah, praise be to Allah, my presence was good, presence of the heart, but I felt very unsettled and sat in a state of tawajjuh. After a while, I witnessed a brief luminosity blended with darkness. It became evident to me that my muraqabah was still dark and not clear and transparent. During the following morning of the 40-day period, I saw myself very luminous on 2 occasions whilst in a state of tawajjuh. In that very state, I was telling myself, Alhamdulillah, it is evident that my muraqabah is fine. The more successful your muraqabah is during the day, the clearer your visions and apparitions will be at night in a state of tawajjuh. So this is something which in the Mosaic retreat, these are prescriptions of muraqabah that is open for everyone to do. Fasting is another prescription for you to try and fast during these 40 days. Also, reciting the Quran. If you can recite, let's say, 1 juz of the Quran every day, if that's a bit difficult, half a juz, if that's difficult, a quarter of a juz, and so on and so forth. Also, istighfar, repenting and seeking Allah's forgiveness, is something very recommended during this 40-day retreat. Okay, then he says, oh my dear, whilst in the state of constriction, spiritual constriction, you feel the heart is being constricted. It's a spiritual state. Many people can't tolerate it. Allama, for example, he said, sometimes in that previous paragraph, I witnessed brief luminosity blended with darkness. He's witnessing a darkness. Many people come to me and say, sometimes I'm seeing these dark figures. They make the wrong conclusion, thinking it's jinn, and they go and ask these jinn masters, so to speak, to come and do it. And the very fact those jinn masters come and read certain things is proof that they're not jinn masters, because they would know if it was a jinn or not. Anyway, the dark figures they see, it's their actions, it's their poor muraqabah during the day. Although it's a blessing to see these dark figures, because it's guiding you, it's warning you that your muraqabah is weak. Compared to someone who never sees these dark figures, at least they're seeing it, and this should be an aid. So they do have a good spiritual scaffolding, they just need refining. Oh my dear, whilst in the state of constriction, reciting the invocation, Ya Basit, Qabid, number of times. Now he's entered the occult sciences here. He's saying, when you're spiritually constricted, what you have to recite is this invocation, Ya Basit, like one who expands or opens up. How many times do you have to say it? Qabid, number of times. These are 2 names of Allah. You have to say, O opener, O expander. How many times? Qabid, number of times. Qabid means constrictor. You get the abjad value of that, and whatever number it is, you recite Ya Basit, that number of times. As I said, this is part of the occult now he's entering, and he's opening up some prescriptions here. Reciting it would be very beneficial, for it brings expansion with it. After all, to unknot something, it must, to unknot, not with a K, to unknot something, it must be read not with a K number of times. Moreover, to knot something with a K, it must be read unknot number of times. These are all occult secrets which he's trying to refer to in a very, concise manner. Oh my dear, then he's now giving some advice, and we'll end after we read through this. Be patient before spiritual contractions or constrictions. Be patient. After all, water was created for the thirsty. In the same manner you are thirsty for water, water too is thirsty for you. This lowlier, referring to himself, has said in a poem, he says, the Ghafir, the forgiver, and the Ta'ib, the acceptor of repentance, were after the sinner from pre-eternity. We're searching for the sinner. All Allah's names dictate such a manner. All of Allah's names are looking for the thirsty, those who are thirsty and a recipient to receive these manifestations of Allah's names. The thirsty go after the water, whilst water itself too is after the thirsty, water being Allah's attribute, the thirsty being the servant. The needy, the thirsty, the needy calls upon Allah, Allah. Allah calls upon the needy. So be patient, you'll get your due. Continuing, he then says, how pleasant has the Sufi Rumi written in his Mathnawi spiritual couplets. Allah's wisdom in the domains of destiny and decree dictates that all things in the cosmos are in love with one another. The thirsty seeks as to where wholesome water lies, whilst the water seeks as to where the thirsty lies. Between water and thirsty, there's love. The relationship between the two is that of love. One must seek for one's thirst, one's potential, in order for one's water, Allah's attributes, to spring forth from all directions, and you be a recipient of it. Allah's attributes is always springing forth, but you're not a recipient yet. So be needy. Be needy, you'll be given it. It'll pour down upon you and you'll be a recipient. But until then, be patient, but be rest assured it will come your way. Furthermore, as Hafiz has said, a famous Iranian poet, do not execute servitude like the needy because of reward, because Allah Himself knows the method of dignifying His servants. Then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh continues, be patient. Even if it comes late and you see those visions and apparitions, you have your faraj of the 12th Imam in the form of visions and even if it's late, be patient. Even if it comes late, he says, it will indisputably not be fake. The later in your spiritual journey, the more later you have those visions, the less fake it will be. As it said in chapter 74 verse 7, and be patient for the sake of your Lord. Then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh says, they will not bestow it quickly so that one's capacity be acquired. They're not going to give these attributes to you quickly. You have to be patient. They won't give it quickly so that one's capacity be acquired. but the later your capacity would be acquired, the better it is for you. See how eloquently Fariduddin Attar, known as Sheikh Attar, has composed in his Mantiq al-Tayr, very good set of poems, collection of poems, known as Conference of Birds. It's translated into English too. There, the translation reads, and I've used this from someone who's translated the translated publication of it. I can't remember who the translator was, but this is the translation. It reads as thus, that in deep despair, Sheikh Mahna made his way across the empty desert wastes one day. Sheikh Mahna is here symbolic of a righteous traveller to Allah, a salik, one who is travelling in this journey to Allah and who's thirsty for Allah, thirsty to be a recipient of Allah's attributes and to have those visions and apparitions. And he's in the desert, he's thirsty for it. A peasant with a cow came into sight, and from his body played a lambent light. Then he encountered someone. This someone is a true mentor who can now guide him on what to do. He, the Sheikh, hailed, not the mentor, the Sheikh, who was a traveller. He hailed the man and started to narrate, because he saw this light, so he said, this is a mentor. He hailed the man and started to narrate the hopeless turmoil of his wretched state. So the Sheikh Mehna says, look, I'm going on this journey towards Allah, but I'm in a state of wretchedness, I'm not succeeding, you help me. The old man heard, then said, O Abu Sa'id, imagine someone piled up millet seed. So the Sheikh is called Abu Sa'id. The mentor, the kind of disciple of Allah, the lover of Allah, the mentor with the lambent light, who was accompanied with a cow, said to him, look, let me give you this analogy. Imagine someone piled up seed, millet seed, which birds consume. From here to heavens, to highest heavens unknown climbs with a MES at the end, no B. So I just want to clarify it sometimes. From here to highest heavens unknown climbs, and then repeated this 100 times. So from here to the heavens, one has piled seeds 100 times over from here to the heavens. So there's a lot of seeds here. And now imagine that a bird appears and pecks one grain up every 1,000 years. One grain at a time, all those seeds, but only one seed at a time. Then flies around. So he picks one grain for every 1,000 years. And on doing so, then flies around the earth's circumference 100 times from heaven's eminence. And then before taking the next seed, for example, he goes around the circumference. So look how long this takes. In all those years, no sign would come to show Sheikh Abu Sa'id the truth he longs to know. All this time, no sign will come to you. Stop looking for signs. This, everything is in the now, which some not scholars, I mean some non-Muslim thinkers are putting forward. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but we don't have this in Islam. There's nothing in the Quran or the Ahadith which point to it. But also, why is everything in the now? We shouldn't confine things right in the now. We shouldn't deny the past or the future. Everything is present. Everything is in the present. But to say now is problematic. Not to say it's wrong, but there's no Islamic basis for it. And we have the origins, we have resurrection, but everything is existing. But to think that you should see everything and restrict the seeing to the now, that would be problematic. It's not on a par with Islamic texts. In all those years, no sign would come to show. So years and years, you were practicing. You were undergoing ascetic disciplines, but no sign would show yet. You see, no sign is going to show yet, and it shouldn't show yet. Don't expect things right now. Sheikh Bu Said, the truth he longs to know, that truth you long to know, don't expect to experience it now. You have to be patient for a long time yet. So that philosophy of everything is the now is kind of belittling spiritual prescriptions that we have. Such is the patient that our pilgrims need. So you have to be very patient. And many start our quest, but few succeed. Okay, and then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh says, furthermore, those who are bestowed upon later become more proficient and thus acquire better and more. We know of some people whose path opened up early, but most of their words are shallow rather than deep. However, with Akhund Mullah Hussein Qoli Hamadani, the path opened up before him after 22 years. How strong a possessor of secrets he became. Pay attention to point number 641 of this humble servant's book, 1001 Points. And this is what he says in that book. He says, the late Akhund Mullah Hussein Qoli Hamadani was a student of the late transcendental philosopher Mullah Hadi Sabzawari. He was a student in philosophy. And in Gnosticism and spiritual wayfaring, he was, Mullah Hussein Qoli Hamadani, in Gnosticism and spiritual wayfaring, he was a student of the late Sayyid Ali Shushtari. It was only after 22 years of spiritual wayfaring that His Excellency, Mullah Hussein Qoli Hamadani, reached fruition and attained to his destination, that communion with Allah. His Excellency himself has said that, then the memoir of Mullah Hussein Qoli Hamadani, but after 22 years. Moosa underwent 40 days. With us, we have to undergo 22, for example, mosaic retreats or even more. And don't be disappointed if it comes later. It's better. With the infallibles, this equation doesn't hold because they're infallible. With us, the later the better. Don't want everything now. Now the memoir reads this. Now this is the words of Mullah Hussein Qoli Hamadani. As a result of not attaining to the intended objective, I was in turmoil until one day, while sitting somewhere in Najaf, maybe in the corner of a courtyard, I saw a pigeon sitting with a piece of very dry bread in its mouth. However much it would try to break the piece of bread with its beak, it would not break into smaller pieces. The pigeon abandoned the bread and flew off. After a while, it returned to the same piece and started pecking it a few times, but the dry piece of bread would not crumble. It flew off again and flew away again. Then after a while, it returned again, and this time it managed to break the bread into pieces with its beak, and then it consumed the bread. I became inspired from what I saw of the pigeon's action, that one must have a strong will and endeavor. Then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh continues and says, in the book of poems of this most inferior of people referring to himself, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, it reads, at the stage of fear and hope, the first step is this. When you're in turmoil, in spiritual wayfaring, you have fear, you have hope, you're in a state of spiritual constriction, you don't know what to do. You must prepare your journey's provisions. with being ready to sacrifice all for Him. You have to prepare your journey's provisions. And this must be done in a way that you're ready to sacrifice everything for Him. Your knowledge, your family, your worldly possessions. Only then you are truly ready. Then the poem continues, endeavour. The Khizri guide, which means the mentor, and moderation of constitution. You shouldn't be over animalistic. Your bodily constitution should be standard. Your hormonal constitution has to be standard. If you have a psychiatric problem, you're not ready for this yet. You have to first be stabilized from that psychiatric problem and then start endeavoring. With this threesome endeavor, the mentor, the Khidri guide, and the moderation of constitution, with this threesome, one will access results. This is just a translation of the poem which I've done. That's why the prose and the rhyming, you have to forgive me that I can't, I didn't succeed in that manner. Okay, so endeavor is important and patience. So, inshallah, in this Mosaic retreat, in this retreat and in future years, and in succeeding other retreats, we try our best, but we have to be patient. And then maybe with Allah's blessing and Him granting us success, we may attain to our faraj, our deliverance. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.